We continue now at the top of Daf Ayin Ches Aleph in Meseches Kiddushin. This is Kiddushin Daf 78a. On the previous Amud, the Gemara said that a woman becomes a chalola only if she engages in a relationship which is a prohibition related to kahuna, some kind of violation, some kind of isser, that a Kohen is not allowed to have that relationship. And so therefore, Rav Ashi says, let's say a Kohen or a Kohen Gadol has relations with his sister, so Zona Mashvila, so he makes it that she's a Zona, but Chalola lo Mashvila, but he doesn't make her into a Chalola. And Rashi explains, Zona Mashvila, she becomes a Zona. Lilkos Kohen haba od mishum Zona, meaning let's say another Kohen would now have relations with her, so he would get Malkus because she's a Zona. Sharei nivala bi'ilas znus me'asrla, why is she a Zona? Because she had an act of relations which was nus, from someone who was prohibited to her. But again, Chalola lo Mashvila, it doesn't make her a Chalola. As Rashi says, Chalola lo Mashvila, ve'ein Kohen sheni haba loka mishum Chalola. Let's say a second Kohen is with her, he's not going to get Malkus from Chalola, because again, this wasn't a violation of kahuna, this was a situation where you had a brother with a sister. And the Gemara continues, Chazaru ba'aleha. Now let's say he goes ahead and he has relations with her again, so then asa chalola, then she actually becomes a chalola. And Rashi explains, Chazaru va'alehu, let's say he has relations with her, meaning the same Kohen or the same Kohen Gadol has relations with her a second time, O Kohen Acher, let's say another Kohen has relations with her. At that point in time, she has been a Zona, and now there's a prohibition related to the Kahuna. So now Asa Chalola, so now she becomes a Chalola, Sharei Asura lo misham Zona, because now she's prohibited him from the violation of Zona, not just that it's a sister, She'eno noeg ela b'Kahuna, that's something that's only by Kahuna, and that makes her into a Chalola. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Yehuda says, Kohen Gadol ba'almana, if you have a Kohen Gadol with an almana, loka shtayim, there's going to be two sets of malchus. Achas mishum lo yikach, one is because of lo yikach, v'achas mishum lo yechalel, and one is because of lo yechalel. And Rashi explains, Kohen Gadol ba'almana v'hu adin l'kohen hedyot begrusha v'chalola. The same would be true with a regular Kohen with a grusha or a chalola. That's the same as a Kohen Gadol with an almana. Migmar Gemiri Mehadadi, they're learned from each other. Makan Zaro Chulin, just like in the first case, the children are considered Chulin, they're profaned. Aflahalan Zaro Chulin, so too in the other case, the children are considered profaned. Hilkach B'Kohen Hedyot Nami Ika Lo Yechalel. Therefore, you do have the Isser of Lo Yechalel when it comes to a Kohen Hedyot as well. That's learned as well. And so, therefore, you have over here two violations. You have the violation of Lo Yikach. The full pasuk is Almono Grusha V'Chalola Zonas Eila Lo Yikach. Can't take that. Ki im Besula Me'am of Yikachisha. He has to marry a Besula. And then the second pasuk of Lo Yechalel, V'Lo Yechalel Zaro Be'am of Ki Ani Hashem Mekadsho. It says Lo Yechalel. Therefore, there are two violations in such a case. And the Gemara says, V'lilki nami mishum lo yechalel zaro. Now, why don't you have Malkus as well because of lo yechalel zaro? And to that, the Gemara says, B'shalo gomar biyah. So the case over here is that the act of biyah has not been completed. And Rashi explains first lo yikach. The first violation is lo yikach mishum kiddushin. That's because of kiddushin. He took this woman; he wasn't allowed to take her. Ubebiyah shala achar kiddushin hu deka amar lo kashtayim. And then when there's an act of biyah after kiddushin, that's why there's going to be two sets of malchus mishum lo yechalel shachilosa, because he profaned her. And the Gemara says v'lilki nami mishum chilol zaro. There should be an additional malchus because he's profaned the children. And to that, the Gemara says, B'shalo gamar biyasa, there hasn't been a full act of relations. The leka chilul zera, in that situation, you don't have a chilul zera, you don't have a profaning of the seed of the children. Aval hines chala b'hara, but she actually is profaned even with just the beginning of the act of relations. There's no difference in terms of how far the act of relations went. Was it the beginning or was it completed? That doesn't matter in terms of her, in terms of the Isser that's relevant to the woman. And the Gemara continues, Meisiv Rava asks the following question on this. Almono grusha, let's say you have a woman who's both an almana and she's also a grusha. Loka mishum shnei shemos, he's going to get two sets of malchus because it's both almana and grusha, talking about a Kohen Gadol who's usher to an almana, and of course a Kohen Gadol, of course, is also usher to a grusha, just like a regular Kohen. And so my love, what does it mean? Is it not? Shnei shemos v'sulo means to say he's only going to get one set of malchus for almana and one set of malchus for grusha. Now that's not what we said before, because we said by a Kohen Gadol, let's say with an almana, there's already two sets of malchus just for Kohen Gadol with an almana. And so that's why the Gemara says Shnei Shemos v'sulo, and the Gemara says lo, that's not what it means. Shnei Shemos al zeh, Shnei Shemos al zeh. It actually means two sets of malchus on almana, and then it's also two sets of malchus on grusha as well. And Rashi says, Almana grusha ba'al almana she grusha. Again, we're talking about an almana who's also a grusha. Mishum shnei shemos, mishum almana, mishum grusha. There's going to be malchus because he took an almana, and there's going to be malchus because he took a grusha. And the Gemara then says, shnei shemos alzem, meaning vaday shnei shemos to katani grusha ve'almana kamar. When we say shnei shemos, it means that it's a violation of grusha and almana. Umiyu al kalachas lo kashtayim, but it comes out that on each one, on grusha and on almana, it's going to be two each. Mishum lo yikach or mishum lo yechal. Because of lo yikach and lo yechal, there's a violation of lo yikach by almana and lo yechal by almana, and there's another violation of lo yikach and lo yechal by grusha as well. But the Gemara continues, Ihachi, if so, Maseifa, let's look at the end of this brisa. Grusha v'chalutza, let's say the Kohen is with a woman who's both a grusha and a chalutza. Eino chayev el alachas, only chayev one. And so it sounds like for the grusha and chalutza, it's only a total of one. We just said it should be two just for grusha alone. And the Gemara says, no, hachi kamar, this is what it means to say, Eino chayev ela alachas, only chayev on one of them, meaning chalutza is not considered additional, it's just considered grusha over here, uliolam shnei shemos, but really it is going to be two sets of malchus for grusha. And Rashi says, Ela alachas al shem grusha hu chayev, you're going to be chayev on grusha, al kol chiyuv matzluyim, but everything that's dependent on grusha, on both of them. Aval al chalutza lo, but chalutza there actually is no violation. The chalutza lav d'oraisa el d'rabbanan, because chalutza is not d'oraisa, it's only midrabbanan, as the Gemara is about to discuss. And the Gemara says, v'chalutza d'rabbanan, is it really true that chalutza is midrabbanan? V'atanya, but we learned in a brisa, grusha, it says she's a grusha, only a grusha, I only know it's true by a grusha. Chalutza minayin, how do we know that there's also a violation by a chalutza? Talmud lomer, the pasuk says v'isha, the pasuk says v'isha, and it includes this as well, it includes chalutza as well, sounds like it's a doraisa. And to that the Gemara says, no, midrabanan, really the brisa means to say it's drabanan, ukra asmachta v'alma, the pasuk is just an asmachta, it's just something to rely the halacha of the drabanan, the halacha of the rabbanan upon, but it is only midrabanan. And the Gemara continues, Amar Abaya says, Kidesh Loka, if the Kohen is Mekadesh, a woman that he's not allowed to be Mekadesh, so then he gets Malchus, and Baal Loka, and if he has relations with her, there's Malchus as well. Kidesh Loka Mishum Lo Yikach, Kidesh is going to be Malchus because of the violation of Lo Yikach, that's talking about the act of Kiddushin, the acquisition of the woman, so to speak. Baal Loka Mishum Lo Yechal, if he has relations with her, then there's Malchus because of Lo Yechal, as we mentioned above. Rava Amar Barava says, Baal Loka, if there's an act of relations, then there is Malchus, and that's talking even the Malchus for the Kiddushin. Lo Baal, but if there's no act of relations, Eino Loka, so then there's no Malchus at all. Mishum Dechsiv, because it's written in the pasuk, Lo Yikach v'lo Yechalal. It says he can't take, and he can't be Mechalal. Ma'atam Lo Yikach mishum Lo Yechalal. What's the reason of Lo Yikach? It's cause Lo Yechalal. It's all dependent on the Lo Yechalal, according to Rava. And Rashi explains, Kiddush Kohen Gadol or Kohen Head Yorachas Min Apsula So Amuras B'inyan. Again, Kohen Gadol or a regular Kohen is Mekadesh, somebody he's not allowed to be Mekadesh. So Lo Yikach is Kiddushin Mashma. Lo Yikach sounds like just a Kiddushin, the acquisition. Shein HaKonimosa, the way that the person is Koner. But Baal Loka, but then Rava says, no, if there's an act of relations, there's going to be Malchus. Baal Achar Kiddushin Loka Shtayim, meaning if there's an act of relations after the Kiddushin, there is going to be two sets of Malchus. But Lo Baal, but let's say there's no act of relations at all, Eino Loka Afilo Acha, so then there's not going to be even one set of Malchus. And the Gemara continues, Umoda Abaya, but Abaya admits, B'machzer Grusha, so let's say somebody remarries the woman that he divorced, which is a violation. In that situation, Shem Kiddush V'lo Baal, in that situation, if the person has Kiddushin with her, but not an act of relations, She'eino Loka, in that case, actually, there is no Malchus. He admits to Rava in that case, Lekachta Lios Lo L'isha, because there it says, Lekachta Lios Lo L'isha, taking her to be a wife. Amar Achmana, that's what the Torah says. V'holek, and you don't have that in such a situation. And Rashi explains, even though in general Kiddushin alone is enough to get Malchus by the Isser Kahuna, that's over here where they're not independent. The Torah doesn't say that one is dependent on the other. But in the case of a Jewish man who's machzer grushaso, who remarries the woman he divorced, from after she married someone else, and she was widowed or divorced from that second man, even though it says he can't take her again, that's a warning not to be mekadesh her. He admits, in this particular case, again, by machzer grushaso, there's no malchus unless there's an act of relations. Because there it says explicitly that the Kiddushin is dependent on an act of Bia that follows, because it says again, Lekachta lios lo liisha, tekevan dekichu Kiddushin lios lo liisha, isha shel Bia ka'amar. There it's talking about taking her for Kiddushin, for ishas, meaning to say taking her for the act of relations. And the Gemara continues, Umo de Rava. Now Rava admits, the Kohen Gadol ba'almona, let's say I have a Kohen Gadol who takes an almona, so again, that's also for a Kohen Gadol to take an almona, Shim Boal v'lo kiddush, let's say there's an act of relations without the Kiddushin, Shaloka, so in that situation, there will be Malkus, v'lo yechalel zaro b'yamav ha'merachmona, because the Pasuk says he can't profane the children, v'areu chilal, and in this case, he has in fact profaned, Ushneya modim, and both of them admit, but machzer grushaso, let's say by case again, a machzer grushaso, Shimbal v'lo kiddush, let's say there's an act of relations without Kiddushin over there, she'eno loka, there would not be Malkus, derech likuchin asra Torah, because it's only if it's derech likuchin, if it's done by the way a normal Kiddushin is going to be done. And Rashi explains, Umoda Rava admits, Afagav de boy Bisr Kahuna Tarti, even though by Yisr Kahuna he requires both of the Kicha and the Bia, Davka Bia Achar Kiddushin, the boy, Da Kiddushin Lechudayu Lo Lucky. Again, you have to have the Bia after Kiddushin. Aval Boal Velo Kiddush, but let's say over here, you have Boal Velo Kiddush, Modahu Shabi'ila Einatzluya B'Kiddushin. He admits that in this case, again, going in the case of Kohen Gadol Ba'almona, he admits that the act of relations is not dependent on Kiddushin. To Lo Yechalel Amar Achmona V'Arechila, it just says Lo Yechalel. This is a situation where the act of Bia alone, it's Chilel, and therefore there's going to be a violation. So now everybody admits by Machzer Grusha, so Alpha Bishel Divrei Shneim Kohen Bepsula lo loka albia below Kiddushin, even though they say, according to both of them, if a Kohen is with someone that's puzzled to him, that's disqualified to him, so there's Malkus on the Bia without Kiddushin, Modim Heim Bi Yisrael HaMachzer Grushaso Mishanisis Shimbal Velo Kiddush She'eno Loka. By Yisrael, by Machzer Grushaso, Bia alone is not going to be a situation of Malkus. Hachi Garsin and Derech Likuchin Asra Torah Al Habia Lo Parat Lav El Al Yedei Likuchin. It has to be Bia through Likuchin, through Kiddushin de Lo Yuchal Loshav Lekachta Ksiv, because that's what it says in the pasuk. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Rabbi Yehuda says, Bas ger zocher kebas cholol. The daughter of a male convert is the same as the daughter of a male cholol. Both of those daughters are going to be disqualified from the kahuna. And the Gemara now explains the sheet of Rabbi Yehuda. Tanya, we learned in a brayso, Rabbi Yehuda says, Basker zocher kebas cholol zocher. The daughter of a male convert is no different than the daughter of a male cholol. V'hadin nosen, and that makes sense. Ma cholol sheba mitipa ksheira bito psula. Because of a cholol, he comes from a tipa ksheira. He was born Jewish, and yet his daughter is disqualified. So ger sheba mitipa psula. So if you have a ger, he comes from a tipa psula, meaning when he was born, he wasn't even Jewish. Eino din shabito psula. It makes sense to say that his daughter is disqualified from the kahuna as well. But the Gemara says, Malach Cholol, how can you learn from Cholol? But Cholol is unique. Shekein Yitziraso Ba'avera, because the Cholol himself was created Ba'avera, meaning the Cholol was born from a prohibited relationship. That's not true when it comes to a Ger. A Ger was born from two non-Jews, which is a completely permitted relationship. So maybe the Cholol is actually worse than the Ger. You can't learn out the Ger from a Cholol. But the Gemara says we can learn out from Kohen Gadol. Kohen Gadol ba'almana yochiach, because the Kohen Gadol, let's say he marries an almana, that should prove the other way. That should be comparable enough to a situation of a ger zachar. Because if a Kohen Gadol marries an almana, so his daughter she'ein yitziraso ba'avera, the Kohen Gadol himself, of course, was not created ba'avera, and bito psula, his daughter is disqualified. You see a situation of the daughter being disqualified, even though the man himself, the Kohen Gadol himself, is not Yitziraso Ba'avera, so the same should be true by the daughter of the Ger. But the Gemara says, no, Mala Kohen Gadol Ba'almana Shekain be also Ba'avera. Again, by a Kohen Gadol Ba'almana, that relationship itself is prohibited. It makes sense to say the daughter is disqualified. So to that, the Gemara says, Cholol Yochiach, but Cholol proves the other way, because the Cholol, when he marries a Jewish woman, that's not a prohibited relationship. The Chazar Hadin, we go back and forth. We understand by Kohen Gadol Ba'almana, his daughter is disqualified. We understand by Cholol, his daughter is disqualified. Lo roizeh karoizeh, they're not exactly identical cases. Hatzad hashavish behen, what is the common denominator between these two cases? She'enon berov hakol, you're talking about a situation where the person is not allowed into the majority of the community of the congregation. Afani obvious hager, so too I can include the case of a ger. She'eno berov hakol, he also is not berov hakol. Ubito psula, and his daughter is also going to be disqualified from the kahuna. And Rashi explains, She'enon barov hakol, they're not in the majority of the community. What does that mean? Shechalukin mishar kol, it simply means they're different than the rest of the community. Shezeh yitziraso ba'avera, here we're talking about someone that was created ba'avera. V'zeh biyaso ba'avera, here we're talking about an act of relations, which is an avera. So afani avi ger she'eno barov kol, it's no different by a ger. A ger should also be treated like this. He's also not barov kol. Sheba mitiba psula, because he comes from a tiba psula. When he was born, he was not Jewish. But the Gemara continues, but still you can't learn ger from these cases of, let's say, Kohen Gadol with an almana or from a cholol, because there's some kind of avera involved in both of those cases. And so therefore, how can we learn ger from there? And the Gemara says, you're right, lo tema Kohen Gadol ba'almana yochech. Don't bring the proof from a Kohen Gadol ba'almana. There is a tzad avera in that case. Ela'ema mitzri rishon yochiach. Rather, you should bring a proof from the case of a mitzri rishon, a first generation mitzri. And Rashi explains, mitzri rishon shenasa mitzris rishona. You have a case of a first generation convert mitzri who marries a first generation convert mitzri. She'ein yitziraso ba'avera. There, the creation is not ba'avera. V'lo biyaso ba'avera. The act of relations is not an avera. Ubito psula. And yet we know there the daughter is certainly disqualified. Da'ashniya, because that's only second generation. V'rachmana amar dor shlishi. The Torah says you have to be third generation of Egyptian convert in order to be able to enter into the community. And so that's why mitzri rishon actually proves this idea. Here you have a situation where there is no avera involved, and the daughter is going to be disqualified. And so therefore, again, mitzri rishon is yochiach. But the Gemara says not necessarily. Ma'ala mitzri rishon, but mitzri rishon is unique. Shekain eino roy lavo bekal, because by mitzri rishon, it's not just a disqualification to the kahuna. They can't enter the community at all. And so you go back and forth again. Cholol yochiach, cholol will prove the other way. The chazer hadin, we go back and forth. Lo roy zeh karoy zeh. The cholol is not exactly like the case of mitzri rishon. Hatzar hashavish ben, the common denominator between them is, again, she'enon barov kol, that they're not in the majority of the community, ubito psula, and the daughter is disqualified. Afani avi as hager, so too I can include the converts. She'eno barov kol uvito psula, again, not in the majority of the community, and his daughter should be disqualified. But the Gemara says, Ma'ala hatzad hashaveh ben, but what's unique about the tzad hashaveh, meaning again, mitzri rishon and cholol, shekain poslim b'biyasam, there you have a disqualification with the act of relations itself. And Rashi explains, poslim b'biyasan es isha min akuna, with their act of relations, the woman that they have relations with is actually disqualified from the kahuna. Kedetanya le'el b'pirkin ben teshonim v'yom echad ger amoni u'moavi tomar b'ger she'eno posl b'biyaso. That's not true by a ger. A ger doesn't create a disqualification when he's with the woman. That doesn't disqualify her from the kahuna. And the Gemara says that's not necessarily true of Rabbi Yehuda will respond to that. Ger nami posl b'biyaso. A ger also is able to disqualify with his act of relations. You can learn it out from a mahatzad, of a mamatzinu, from this exact limud. And Rashi explains mehaydina from this exact limud that we had above. Macholol sheba mitipa ksheira posel. Just like a chol who comes from a tip of sheira, he creates a disqualification with his act of bia. Ger sheba mitipa psula lo kol shekain. It's true by a ger as well, and so therefore that is not going to ruin this particular limud. And we will note over here that specifically when we talk about the fact that mitzri rishon and cholol, that they disqualify with their act of relations, that's talking about a situation of a daughter of a Kohen. If they have relations with a daughter of a Kohen, they disqualify her from the kuna, and Rabbi Yehuda extends that to a ger as well. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov omer ger. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says the daughter of a ger is fit for the kahuna. Tanya, we learned in a brayso, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai omer. Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai says, Giyores pchusmi bas sholosh shanim v'yom echad. If you have a convert, a girl who converts, and she's less than 3 years old in a day, ksheira lekahuna, she is kosher for the kahuna. Shenemar, as it says in the pasuk of V'chol hataf banoshim hachayu lachem, it says all the young among the women, they can live with you. Sounds like it's talking about marriage. V'alo Pinchas hoya imoim, and Pinchas was with them, and Pinchas was a Kohen, and therefore it seems that these girls were permitted to Kohanim. And Rashi explains, Rabbi Shimon says, Hare arba machlukas bedavra. What we end up having here is 4 different opinions in terms of converts and whether they're fit for the kahuna as follows. Rabbi Yehuda bas ger zocher psula. According to Rabbi Yehuda, the daughter of a male convert is disqualified from the kahuna. V'afilu nasa Yisraelis, even if he married a Yisraelis, meaning even if the ger married a Yisraelis and he had this daughter, she's going to be psula to the kahuna. Rabbi Eliezer ikot sad echad Yisrael machshir. According to Rabbi Eliezer, as long as one side is Jewish, so that's going to be good enough. Umiyu ger v'giores bito psula. But if both sides, let's say it's a male convert marries a female convert, and they have a daughter, according to Rabbi Eliezer, that daughter will be disqualified from the kahuna. Ul Rabbi Yossi, now according to Rabbi Yossi, afilu ger shenasa giores bito kshera. Even if a ger marries a giores, the daughter is fine for the kahuna. Umiyu, but nevertheless, horasa v'leidasa b'kedusha ba, you need the pregnancy and the birth to be b'kedusha that they've already converted. For Rabbi Shimon, and Rabbi Shimon's shita is afilu giores atzma machshir, even the giores herself is okay for the kahuna. Uvilvad shelo tehi ru'uya labia b'giyusa, but she cannot have been old enough to be fit to have relations at the time that she converted. She has to convert earlier when she's very young, to tepek la michlal zona. At that point already, she's taken out from the category of zona. So again, Rabbi Shimon says, if she converts at a very young age, so it's going to be okay. She'll be kshera l'kahuna. And the Gemara continues, v'Rabbanan. Now, what do the Rabbanan respond to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai? He learns from a pasuk that a gioris at a very young age is ksher l'kahuna. The Rabbanan say the pasuk says hachayu lachem. No, what does the pasuk mean when it says hachayu lachem? It just means la'avadim v'l'shvachas. It means you take them to be servants. It doesn't mean you're actually going to marry them. And the Gemara continues, v'kulon mikra echad darshu. Now, all of these shitas, they're all darshaning one pasuk in different fashion. Almono grusha lo yichu lahem lanashim kim besulos mizera beis Yisrael. It says again, they can't take widow divorcees for wives. They can only take besulos mizera beis Yisrael. And we understand the pasuk as follows, according to the various shitas. Rabbi Yehuda says, Adi'is kol zera mi Yisrael. The entire seed has to be mi Yisrael. That's why Rabbi Yehuda says, let's say even one side is going to be a ger, that's going to be a problem. It's going to be disqualified from the kahuna. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says, mi zera vafilu mixas zera. He says mi zera, meaning as long as you have one side Yisrael, as Rashi said, that's going to be okay. Rabbi Yossi says, Mishin Nizru bi Yisrael, anyone who's Nizru bi Yisrael, meaning to say, according to Rabbi Yossi, even if a ger marries a giores, but as long as the pregnancy and the birth was b'kedusha, they had already converted, then it's going to be fine. And Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai Bar Yochai says, Mishin Nizru besuleh bi Yisrael. If she had her besulim come, meaning at a very young age already she had converted, so that's going to be good enough. And Rashi explains, V'harei Pinchas haya beineim. Again, Pinchas was among them. Ben hayotzim l'melchemes Midyan. He was a Kohen. He was out to war. Shenemar lema mikra zeh. That's where this pasuk. That's the context of the pasuk. And so, therefore, again, it seems to be that it's mutter to Pinchas. That was the proof that the Kohen is allowed to marry these young girls who convert. Kol zera and the various drashas. Kol zera. The first shita was it has to be kol zera mi Yisrael, according to Rabbi Yehuda. Kilomar kol ikar hakore zera hainu min ha'av, meaning from the father. La'afuke bas ger zocher, meaning again, if she's the daughter of a male convert, that's going to be a problem, according to Rabbi Yehuda. Mixaz zera filo zera kochash kagon min ha'aim ger shanasi Yisraelis. Let's say a ger marries a Yisraelis, that's going to be good. If you say even mixaz zera, that's according to the shita of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Mishin nizru bi Yisrael, and then we have the shita of Mishin nizru bi Yisrael. That's the shita of Rabbi Yossi. Again, Rabbi Yossi's shita is, according to Rabbi Yossi, as long as the pregnancy and the birth is b'kedusha, sheteho rasa b'kedusha, as long as they had already converted, even by a ger that marries a giores, as long as the conversion took place before the pregnancy. And finally, the last sheet, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, mishenizru b'suleh b'Yisrael, shetzamchu v'gamru b'suleh mishabal lechlal Yisrael, meaning at a very young age, when she forms, that she becomes officially, so to speak, a besula, she's already converted. Dahainu kishenasis bas shalosh, meaning at the time that she's 3 years old, gamru b'suleh labia, that's when she is complete for the act of relations. Shemti bal mikan va'elachen and choser. At that point in time, if she has relations, so then her virginity will not return. Aval kodem shalosh kol shahim choser mitzomchim. But let's say a girl has active relations under 3 years old, so then the besulim are always going to come back. Uvoyin vachi darsh lekra besulos mizera beis Yisrael besulah shalah yu mizera gidula Yehudi. And the Gemara continues, Amar le Rav Nachman l'Rava. Rav Nachman says to Rava, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Ayin Ches Amud Beis.